In the glittering world of Silicon Valley, Jim Reynolds thought he had it all: a thriving tech company, a beautiful wife, and loyal business partners. But beneath the surface, betrayal simmered. At a lavish party hosted by his partner Andrew Schwartz, Jim stumbles upon a shocking scene. His wife, Allie, locked in an intimate embrace with Andrew. As his world unravels, Jim's anger turns to vengeance. He quietly hatches a plan to dismantle the company they built together, aiming to destroy both Andrew and Allie. With emotions running high, Jim confronts Allie, leading to a fierce showdown that reveals the depth of their deception. The stage is set for a battle of wills, where loyalty and love are sacrificed for power and revenge. "Just sign the paper, Jim," Andrew said. "I've checked it already. It's just a regular IPO form. Just don't sell until I tell you to." I stared at Andrew Schwartz, our business-minded colleague. He looked confused and a bit annoyed. It felt like I had signed 1,000 papers just this week and everyone was stressed. Harry Loeb, our lawyer, which is a bit funny considering his name, nodded at me. He and Andrew had been with me since we started Ipswich Inc. a few years ago. So I signed the paper. Finally, Gordon Jenkins brought out a bottle of champagne and poured it for us. The four of us raised our glasses to celebrate that starting Monday, our company would be on NASDAQ as the newest IPO. Ipswich Inc. makes custom router software. Honestly, we have some great ideas. Andrew ran the business. Gordon took care of installations and product improvement. Harry was our lawyer and I wrote the code. It was more than just that, though. We had 100 employees and needed money to hire even more. Many companies liked our work, and Andrew was able to connect us with some banks interested in helping. We weren't big enough for Goldman Sachs yet, but they did get a small part of us through some tricky financial moves that I didn't really understand. My job was to code and ensure my team was working well together. That's why we had Andrew. He took care of the business side. Just as we finished our toast, Andrew came over and put his hand on my shoulder. "So, what's happening with the nerd herd? Is the new version ready yet?" I sighed. "Please don't let them hear it from you. Yes, we're on track and it will be ready soon." We had a small disagreement. Andrew wanted the new product ready for his sales team, and I wanted to ensure it was really good without overwhelming our current customers. I had worked in code and IT for a long time before we started our company, so I knew that if customers are not happy, they will leave. We often clashed, but with Harry and Gordon helping us work things out, we built a good working relationship. He pushed me to work hard, and I kept his excitement in check. "Are you going to have a problem with the IPO and stock?" Andrew asked, talking about my role on the board of directors in 2000. I had just graduated and was working for a tech company. My new wife, Allie, and I were hopeful for the future, and my first job gave me a good share in the company. Anyone who remembers that time knows how many tech companies failed. We weren't rich or in deep debt, but our pay left us with very little. When my first job fell apart, it was a very cold and lonely time for a software designer. Many of my classmates were in the same boat. From my experience, I made sure we paid our designers real money instead of just giving them stock in a private company. Andrew thought that giving stock would be cheaper and motivate them more. After living on ramen noodles since college, I disagreed. The final decision was up to the four of us on the board. Gordon agreed with me since we were the same age, but Andrew showed us the numbers until Harry suggested a middle ground. Everyone received a base salary, but they could choose stock instead of bonuses and other rewards. It seemed to work well because Andrew and I were still unhappy. Still, he was right. Those who bought stock were likely to see it rise in the next 3 months, while others might feel left out. Several of our employees tried to change their choices at the last minute. We needed to return to the party, which was the way we marked this phase of business. Andrew insisted on the celebration. On one hand, we needed to keep our investors happy. On the other hand, those of us who were married had to keep our wives content. The last few months were tough, with analysts watching our every move and checking different insurance companies that wanted to work with us. It was exciting to start the IPO. Andrew, who was single, enjoyed food and drinks in a way that meant little to him. Even during the party, he watched CNBC on TV, though the sound was off. "How are things with you and Allie?" he asked. As we reached the top of the stairs, I looked into his modern living room filled with light and windows. I noticed my wife, who I had been with for 11 years, happily chatting and laughing with our friends and business partners. Her blonde hair bounced as she smiled at an older businessman who had invested in our company early on. He casually held her elbow. She laughed and playfully pushed him away, raising her glass to show it was empty before heading to the bar. It was a familiar move for her, friendly but not crossing any lines. "That's just Allie," I said with a smile. "You know, Andy, it's like most relationships. It has its ups and downs." I waved my hands in the air for him. "You're such a nerd," he laughed. I joined in his laughter. "I'm not a nerd. I'm a budding entrepreneur." "Don't quit your job," he said, looking at me. "Why?" I asked. "You all were talking about your wives and family stuff, so I thought I would ask," he said while studying me. I frowned. She doesn't love spending hours writing code, but I believe that when the IPO brings in money, she'll change her mind. If there's one thing she loves besides me, it's money. He laughed a little. Allie had always wanted to earn enough money to enjoy a nice life, and she was working hard to make that happen as fast as our budget allowed. We had our share of little fights about it, but nothing really serious. At least, that's how it seemed to me. I left him and walked over to where she was talking to a couple, stopping briefly at the buffet to grab a plate of snacks. The woman looked like a typical California girl in a green dress, while the man next to her had a tough look and wavy brown hair. It was my turn to join the conversation. Allie was chatting happily with them and saw me coming from the corner of her eye. "Hey, this is Jim," she said, raising her hand to point at me. "My husband," Jim added with a smile. He paused for a second, as if something I did had upset her, but then she acted like nothing happened. "Yes, you're my husband. We have the same wedding ring, silly girl," she teased, her voice a bit playful. The woman laughed and said, "Well, of course we noticed that," the man asked with a grin. "Are you wearing a wedding ring?" The woman playfully smacked his arm, saying, "Be nice." He laughed again. "Just joking. I'm Phil and this is Terry, my wife, so don't even think about it." He put his arm around her waist. I reached out my hand. "Jim Reynolds," I said. We shook hands and began chatting comfortably. I answered a few of his business questions, and things were going well. Then suddenly, someone bumped into me without looking. My plate slipped from my hand and fell, causing salsa to splash all over my shirt. "Oh no!" Allie shouted. She quickly dropped to her knees to clean up the mess on the carpet. "That's going to stain! Don't step on it," she said. I didn't move. Phil joked, "Now I see why your parents didn't name you Grace." I rolled my eyes, and Allie took my hand. "Come on, we need to fix your shirt," she said. "I can handle it," I replied, trying to wipe it off with a napkin. "It's silk," she urged, pulling me toward the kitchen. We didn't stop there and went through a back door to a utility room I had never seen before. "Take off your shirt," she said, frowning. "I don't know why you're so upset. It was just an accident." "That guy bumped into me," I explained. "You could have moved out of the way," she replied, opening a cabinet. She took out some stain remover and started working on the mark in the utility sink. "Now I'll be stuck in a wet shirt for the rest of the night," I sighed. I had seen this happen in our marriage before. She loved me, but sometimes she thought I wasn't very smart. I guess it came from my education. I took regular showers and didn't stare at girls in pretty dresses. I never went to a Star Trek event, but I had some strange hobbies and even stranger friends. Well, they seemed strange for a girl who liked being social rather than staying in her parents' basement. The next part of my story starts here. The oddness began the very next day. We were having a book signing party on Friday, and I was just hanging out at home. Our house was in that awkward space between a regular home and a big mansion. It looked nice, but we often argued about money. Allie wanted a place that matched our lifestyle, and I wanted one we could actually afford. I earned over $250,000 each year from my salary and business profits, but that didn't mean much in California. I felt uneasy about the high cost of housing, but the house itself was okay. I must give credit to Allie. It was really nice and cozy. It didn't feel like the usual gray California houses that Andrew liked. She decorated it beautifully and kept it within budget, even if some extra little decorations appeared now and then. I was sitting in my wood-paneled room, working on some computer code when I heard my email ding. I opened it and saw a message from my friend Carl. I hadn't heard from him since I sent him the plans for our new programs, so I expected it to be about that work. But it wasn't. Instead, there was news about a guy named Jim. He had come to my mother's house to talk to me about something called the Rela Beta. At that moment, I was at Sheila's, so I missed Jim. He wanted to talk privately and knew how to reach me. I met Carl back in middle school. We became friends because my family had moved to a lonely ranch house far away, and Carl was the only kid around for miles. I also learned that Carl had a tough time because he had Tourette's syndrome, which wasn't well known back then. Kids can be unkind, and Carl was pretty angry. His parents moved him to a farming community where it was easier for him to fit in. At first, things were a bit rocky between us, but that first summer changed everything. His parents got him a Sega Genesis. Within a week, his mom had to kick us out of the living room just to get some peace. By winter, we were both shoveling snow, collecting cans, and doing chores to save up for the next big video game, Castlevania. Mortal Kombat and Sonic were our go-to games. Eventually, some other guys joined us while Carl played. When he played, his tics lessened, and he became much happier. However, Carl still struggled with shyness. I did most of the talking when we worked together, whether we were dog-sitting, mowing lawns, or taking on other jobs. So, when I decided to go to college, Carl really wanted me to attend the same school and be his roommate. I said yes. We both signed up to study computer science because we loved video games and wanted to plan for our future. Sadly, Carl's Tourette syndrome didn't get better over time, which is common for many people. In high school, I was his roommate and close friend. I occasionally helped him with schoolwork. I also wanted to hang out with other friends, which made me feel bad. But I wanted to have fun too. Carl wasn't the best at meeting girls, so I split my social life between him and dating. I met Allie in junior high, and we started dating seriously in high school. I kept my two lives separate, so Allie didn't spend much time with Carl except for a few movie outings. We moved in different social circles. Looking back, I see that my relationship with Allie took my attention away from Carl. I felt guilty about it, but that happens in all relationships, especially when there's a girl involved. Allie was more outgoing, and we balanced each other well. She wasn't great with money while I was good at math. One time I asked her why she liked me after we started dating. She said it was because I was what she wanted. "What do you mean?" I asked her, not fully understanding. She looked at me as if I should already know, like when girls do that. "You know, the package," she explained. "If I knew, I wouldn't have asked, right? A package is what a girl looks for in a guy. For many girls, it's often similar. You need to be cute. You can't be too handsome or you might scare them away, but you also can't be unattractive. You should be easy to get along with and nice. It helps if you are fit and a bit taller, with good job prospects. There's more, but that sums it up." I smiled and asked her if that sounded too planned. "Not more than if you were checking out my skills, my family, and my looks," she replied. "That's what dating is, finding the right match. Many people don't realize they choose whom to love. I just happen to choose you." She hugged me and kissed me in a way that made me feel warm inside, and I wondered what to say next. We got married, hoping everything would go smoothly. But then the internet bubble burst. We both struggled to find jobs, with me looking for office work and her in retail, trying to make ends meet after we moved to California. We lost touch with many old friends over the next 6 years. I ran into Carl again when I returned home for my father's funeral. After taking care of some things, I saw him in the backyard of a Pizza Hut, wearing a red cape. Honestly, I was surprised and decided to stay an extra day to talk to him. He was still searching for a good job, but many people were also looking, and he had made a few social mistakes without much experience. He was tired from doing chores. We had just started our business, and I was overwhelmed with more work than I could handle alone. So I made him an offer. I would send him some tasks, and he could do them for free on his own time. I know you might think I'm being unfair, but my business was struggling, and I couldn't pay him anything. We were a real company, and he could at least add this work to his resume when he applied for jobs. Plus, he needed to improve his skills. Working with me would give him a chance to practice in a real situation. If he did well and we succeeded, then I could pay him later. That way, we both had something to gain. In short, he agreed. He improved enough to get on the list. For the last 3 years, I hired him to do work and paid him a steady salary. The only difference was that he worked from home in Ohio, not in Silicon Valley. He never met any of the other employees, and I was the only one he talked to in person. So, who reached out to him? The computer software industry has its friendly moments, but it can also be competitive. The examples of Steve Jobs and Bill Gates show how things can go. Someone found and looked into Carl, but how did they even know about him? Living far away in Ohio, he was doing software work for a California company. And what's more, he was doing it really well. I thought about this for a while. On one side, I felt happy for him. He had come a long way from delivering pizzas to being noticed by other companies. On the other hand, I didn't like that someone else knew about him. As far as I knew, only our company was aware of him, and I was his only direct contact. But that didn't mean others at work didn't know that Carl's email was something special. It wasn't just me he was in touch with, but only HR and I had his personal details. Either someone had shared something or another company had worked hard to find Carl Metzler all the way across the country. I sighed and decided to hold off on that question for now. I could ask some direct questions later with the HR department. I was happy for him. The fact that he was getting noticed would boost his confidence. I believed he wouldn't turn it down. He liked what he had now, a girlfriend, a good job, and being close to his mom. But I wondered what would happen if he moved to another company. That thought made me uneasy, but it would help him grow. Since he found Sheila, I was no longer his only friend. He needed to focus on himself, and I would support him. I looked at my screen, thought for a moment, and then typed a message. Did you send out resumes? How did they find you? I don't really understand what's happening. How do they know about Rilke? Are you sure about the beta number? The hackers talked a lot, but there's a big difference between talking about a version and trying to take the code. I didn't think Carl would go that far, especially since he told me to watch out for anyone trying to steal it. But that wasn't what worried me the most. Knowing where Carl lived made me uneasy. Maybe someone had just looked at our school's alumni lists and linked me to others on our corporate board. That was something to consider. The rest of the weekend was quiet. I stayed home and played Lord of the Rings for background noise while I worked on my code. Rilke. I really enjoy Lovecraft. Sumi Andrew made me promise that we would name our work projects instead of using market names. Our latest version, SpoilSport, was meant to improve router security and make networking faster. It wasn't brand new, like a new operating system, but it did offer a speed boost. It also had a side effect. Older systems got enough of a speed bump that people could put off buying new computers, which marketers loved. It was better to spend a little on new software than a lot on new machines. It was a short-term fix, but wasn't that how business often worked? When I walked into the room, Allie was looking at the TV. "How many times have you watched that?" she asked. "Lost count?" I liked having some noise while I worked. "You should try watching new movies. Stay up to date. Not just this fantasy stuff." I looked at her. "It's been a common theme lately. Remember when I took you to see them a few years ago? You thought they were amazing." She frowned a bit. "Sure, but back then they were new and exciting. Now they feel like a nerd thing." I sighed. "These are classic movies. They will be remembered as some of the best films of our time. I like other movies too, but sometimes I just want to watch these." "Oh, like The Hunt for Red October, Metropolis, and Wrath of Khan? Those are all classics. They've stood the test of time like those cool muscle cars. What are they called? The ones with the horse symbol?" I asked, recalling she liked those cars. "Mustang," she said excitedly. "I wish you were cool enough to get a Mustang," she teased. "Why wouldn't I be?" I replied. "I have a nice car already." "Maybe when you replace it," she suggested. I thought about it. I was getting successful enough to buy a nice car, like a Mustang, and that would make Allie happy. She was always talking about the cool things our friends had. But I wanted a car that could fit more than just two people. One day, if we ever had kids, which seemed less and less likely, the next day was busy. We had just been to the stock market, and many of our team wanted to stare at the stock ticker. The mood was mixed. Some people who received their paychecks were down or trying hard to feel happy for their co-workers, who were sometimes cheerful and sometimes sad. I usually could tell how things were going by the sounds from the office, lots of groans and some cheering. There were more groans than cheers. I tried not to think about it too much. We had code to write and customers to help. It was easy to get caught up in quick money, but fast money came from hard work. Without a good product or service, we could end up like other companies that failed. I did some quick math in my head and saw that my savings had gone up by $5,000. I took a chance. I wasn't perfect. I was about to go back to my work when my email alerted me. I used the same sound for all my emails, so it reminded me of weekends. I spent some time looking for code downloads and checked the safety of the VPN Carl and I set up. Nothing showed up. I checked my email again. Still no response from Carl. I sent him another message asking how the code module was going and to tell me about this person again. When I got home that night, Allie was already in bed looking upset. I knew this because normally, no matter how late I came home, she would cuddle with me and put her arm around me, but not that night. I noticed she had been down a lot lately. I felt bad about my late hours. Work continued like usual. People were still watching the stock ticker. I jokingly complained about blocked financial websites. Jared, one of our programmers, just smiled. "How long do you think it would take a room full of programmers to break your firewall?" Everyone laughed, and William waved his iPhone at me, sticking his tongue out playfully. "That's great," I said with a smirk. "Now all you so-called internet millionaires will have even more reason to work late like me." This made the stockholders groan, and some of the non-stockholders chuckle. When I entered my office, Hector, my second programming assistant, was sitting in a chair in front of my desk, looking around. "Hi, I need to talk to you about something," he said, standing up as I walked in. Mindy had warned me about this before I came in. "Hector," I greeted him, looking confused. "What's wrong? Could you take a look at the subroutines of the 5.05 multiplex?" he asked a little nervously. "I'm not sure these guys are doing their jobs well." I thought about it for a moment. "That's Reginald Ryan's section. They seem skilled. What's the issue?" He started to explain the problem, and I would like you to check their source code for any mistakes. We didn't have any issues with this project during the last run, but now we have a problem. "Okay," I said. "I'll check it out." He looked at me with expectation. I just stared back. "I'll check it out, is that all?" He broke from his thoughts. "Yeah, I guess so," he said, sounding disappointed. "All right, why don't you see if you can find out where it went wrong? So I don't have to sift through a few thousand lines of code? You're their supervisor." He just stared blankly. "Okay, boss," he said quietly, then turned to leave. Next, we had bug reports. The next day was filled with problems. Andrew asked if I could do an interview about our company, so I spent the morning on that. I have to say, the young guy asked some good questions, even though he seemed to know less about the company than I did. He was really excited to talk to me and acted like an eager student. Near the end of the interview, I asked him, "Which publication do you work for?" I wanted to know which tech magazine had hired him after he graduated. "Oh, I run a tech blog that's doing well. I got 20,000 visits last year," he said. I wanted to leave, but I tried to be polite and exit quickly. After all, this young man hadn't made an appointment with me. I went out for lunch, which included a couple of strong drinks. Andrew seemed to be ready with another joke, or maybe he was just pushing things too far in this business. I felt like I had interviewed everyone, and now this. That was why he was hired. Feeling relaxed from the drink, I returned to work and started checking the code that Reg and Ryan had issues with. I spent around 2 hours going through the details, but then I decided I needed to retrace my steps. I looked in my mailbox. The module had already been approved as working on its own 2 weeks ago. I searched for a confirmation email but couldn't find one. That was strange because I was sure it existed. When I got home early to make a change, things took a turn for the worse. I received a letter from Carl. It read something like this. "Jim, sorry for my late response. Sheila and I spent the weekend. You have a problem? Someone is asking how far I've gotten with Rilke and if I'm almost finished." How did he find out about the details we discussed last week? It took me a moment to realize what he had done. I went looking for a translation site since the message was in a simple code called ROT13. In this code, each letter is shifted by 13 places in the alphabet. So A becomes N, B becomes O, and so on. It was easy to use, but could confuse many people for a bit. When I translated it, I understood his message clearly. I leaned back in my chair, feeling uneasy in my stomach. 6 months ago, while I was visiting my mom, I met a young woman named Sheila on a flight to Columbus. She was reading a book about Tourette syndrome, and we started chatting. Her younger brother had the condition, and she was studying medicine. I told her about my friend Carl, whose symptoms didn't get better as he got older. She wanted to meet Carl as a case study. It turned out she wanted to learn more about him. 2 months ago, he moved in with her. He seemed happier than ever. His job took a bit of a hit, but I understood. I'm not perfect either. The problem was that the Human Resources Department only had his old address at his mom's place. The only way I had his new address was in my planner. I started to type a reply, but paused. Carl was very clever. He wrote in code because he worried our emails might be read by someone else. We used a VPN to send his messages using strong security measures so no one could snoop. But this only kept our emails safe from outsiders. If people within the company knew about our discussion last week, then something wasn't right. I had canceled a meeting with the design team because of extra work for the IPO and public relations. Where could this information have come from? I opened my planner. Carl's name was there, with his address crossed out and Sheila's name written instead. I had done this weeks ago and hadn't thought to share it. It was one of those many tasks I had to put aside due to changing priorities. My feeling of dread grew stronger. Had someone been in my home? I thought about everyone who had visited. Ali, of course, Swati, our housekeeper, all of Ali's friends who came over. Sometimes workers would come too. Had we had any repairs lately? I tried to learn about social engineering all the time. We had a good security system, but so many people came through our house. We even had a pool cleaner, a lawn service, and a pest control guy, and that was just what I could remember. What else had been left behind or looked at? I thought I could deal with this myself. But the problem seemed to be growing. I was good at managing people, writing code, balancing a checkbook, and even picking a stock or two. But I wasn't well informed about politics, and in my view, safety and understanding people were part of that. To tackle this, I needed to talk to Andrew. I checked the kitchen for Ali. She wasn't there, but had left something for me. Next to the microwave were some quickly cooling boxes of Chinese food and a note saying she was off to a spinning class. It turns out there's a thing in cycling where someone trains for a big climb, like Everest. She was doing extra workouts when the event came to town. That saved me from asking who among her friends noticed my place. At least until Andy mentioned something to me, and I really didn't want to think it was Swati. She had lived with us for 2 years and seemed like such a great person. Even though Ali had her own problems, I thought it was a matter of women wanting their own space. I sighed, got in my car, and drove to Andy's house. 2 hours later, I was back in my kitchen. I frowned at the cold boxes of food and put them in the fridge for later. After that, I stood frozen in thought for a few minutes. Then I made up my mind and walked to the top shelf of the pantry where we kept extra drinks. I knew there was an open bottle of whiskey I had bought at the Sky Mall store on a past business trip, but I wasn't in the mood to think clearly right now. I opened a new bottle and poured some into a glass with ice. Then I settled into the breakfast nook. So that's how she knew where the creek was. I hesitated but picked up my phone and called. "Hey, it's Jim. Tell her not to come back. She doesn't fit in here." I hung up without waiting for a reply. 5 minutes later, the phone rang and changed everything. I hadn't called ahead because I was feeling a bit out of touch. By the time I got to Andy's house, my head was spinning with questions. There were so many possibilities. Andy's house was one of those homes with lots of glass that looked out over the valley. I stepped out of the car and walked to the front door. Night had fallen and a bright light lit up the inside of the house, shining through the big wooden door. I saw a woman's blonde hair as she turned the corner. I paused, a smile creeping on my face, and my original plans faded away. I wished I could explain why I was there, but I couldn't. I wanted to see this new woman who Andrew was with. He had shared many, as he called them, beautiful stories before, and it seemed this woman was now in his life. So I quietly slipped in behind her. I'm not perfect, and I know that. I'm just a man. I peeked in to see if I should interrupt. I quietly moved along the gravel path to the side wall and looked through the big glass panel. She was at the bar, and then I saw Andy walking toward her. He reached out to her, and I felt shocked. Was this a mistake? Was it a secret relationship? I hoped at least that he wasn't taking advantage of her. Then they leaned closer to each other. She's betraying me right in front of me. I started to feel a little bit calm again, so I took out my iPhone and began recording. I needed some kind of proof. I wasn't quite sure yet what I needed proof for, but my inner nerd wanted it, even while I felt a mix of anger and shame. After a while, I had seen enough and went to my car feeling dazed. I don't remember how I got home. The next morning, Swati walked into the house and saw the empty bottle of scotch on the kitchen table. She had already passed my car parked on the street. When she saw me eating a warm plate of pork lo mein for breakfast at 10 a.m., her expression changed. "How are you doing, Mr. Reynolds?" she asked cheerfully. "Hi, sweetie," I replied glumly. "Are you looking for something, Mr. Reynolds?" she asked while looking around the house. I wasn't usually home in the morning. I typically saw her at the end of the day unless I was working from home. We had hired an older woman to help clean. I knew we should have hired someone local, but Allie thought it was cool to be different. "No, I'm not sick," I said. She put down her bag and lunchbox, then walked through the kitchen to the living room. There, she probably noticed the blinking message light on her phone, filled with dozens of messages, and a stack of Allie's photos in the corner. "Did Mrs. Reynolds leave?" she asked, looking innocent. "Yes," I replied sadly, adding for some reason, "forever." She thought about this for a moment. "Good," she finally said, shaking her head curiously. "That told me everything I needed to know about my marriage. I didn't go to work that day. This was new territory for me. You don't enter a marriage expecting a divorce. We don't do that where I'm from. Maybe it's different in California. How do you split 10 years of belongings? How do you handle the money?" Every half hour or so, my phone would ring. I checked the caller ID each time. If it was her, I didn't answer. If it was one of her many friends, I didn't answer. If it was some random number, I didn't answer. In short, I just ignored the calls. She didn't come by that day. I had mixed feelings about it. On one hand, if I had seen her, I would have been very angry. On the other hand, I needed to know she cared and would want to come home to fix things. I wish I could say I was calm and responsible, but I wasn't. Swati took out the trash and went about her day, cleaning and chatting on her phone in Hindi. She was probably talking about the latest gossip in our lives. At least she was having a good time while I was left to clean up. Last night, I had put away all of her many photos. There was a big stack of pictures. I used to feel proud of her and how she looked, but now I couldn't stand to see her even in photographs. I thought about tearing up the pictures and burning our wedding album. But then I calmed down and realized that I had lighter fluid, but I could only burn it once while my feelings were all over the place. I started looking for marriage counselors, divorce lawyers, movers, and a lot of liquor. Around lunchtime, Swati brought me some food and iced tea, which I needed because Hindus use chili like a vegetable instead of a spice. I was thankful for the meal, and it wasn't bad at all. She checked on me often, probably to make sure I hadn't done anything crazy and to update her social media. I couldn't believe how cynical I had become. Toward the end of the day, I locked myself away to play some Xbox. I was still thinking a lot about everything, and I needed a break to let my thoughts settle. People like me, we can sit around for days and then suddenly write code for hours without stopping. I had my caffeine but switched to iced tea since it was easier on my stomach. Right now, I felt lonely and cold in my bed. It wasn't just that she was gone, it felt like she could be gone forever. I still didn't want to see her. Images of us together flashed through my mind. I remembered our awkward moments. Even though she seemed distant, she had never allowed me to feel this way before. Did I really know who she was? Did she even know who she was? The next morning, I told Mindy I would arrive closer to noon. Swati showed up around noon. I heard her unlocking the door and rushed to answer. "Who is it?" she asked. My wife looked up from where she was standing with the key. "It's me, sweetie," she said briefly. "Oh, hello, Mr. Reynolds. Miss Allie is here to see you." My wife paused, looking blank. For the past 2 years, Swati had been calling her Mrs. Reynolds. She didn't know yet, but my wife had just done something really nice for me. My wife turned around. "Swati, this is my house and you don't need to introduce me. I live here." "May I escort you to the visiting room?" Swati asked. "No, you can't." My wife walked down the hall, throwing her purse on the nightstand as usual. When she looked up, she saw me standing there. She jumped back, surprised. "Allie?" There was no greeting. "I told you not to come. This is still my house, and we have a lot to talk about." We had a lot to talk about before. You seem to have a positive attitude about it." She looked nice, with fresh makeup and new clothes. I wondered if she had gone shopping or if someone else had given her those clothes. "Yesterday was really rough, but I got through it and put on some makeup," she said with a small, sad smile. We gradually moved to the living room. I sat down in the only chair because I didn't want to sit next to her. "Is this the talk where you tell me it was just a mistake? That it was just a moment and that it won't happen again?" She paused and looked down at her hands. "No, this is a talk where I'm asking for a divorce. Do you really think I'm foolish enough to risk our marriage over a simple kiss? Well, no wonder you got over it so quickly. You've already found someone new, and it looks like you've been spending time with them. Were you always having fun without me?" She looked very uneasy. "Can I?" She paused. "Sweetie, could you please get me a glass of white wine? Would you like anything?" she asked me. "No, we have hemlock if you want some." There was no noise from the kitchen. "Swati again?" "Nothing." "What's wrong with her?" she asked, getting up to go to the kitchen. "Morals, principles, character," I replied. She glared at me as she turned away. That night I looked through her purse. She had been sorting through some papers. Inside there were not one but two stacks of papers. One was a divorce petition with our names on it. The other was a legal paper from Ipswich. I read the first line when the doorbell rang. I looked out and saw a man in a cheap suit with a stack of papers. I grabbed the papers and rushed toward the back door through the kitchen as I passed her. Allie started grabbing my arm. "Jim, where are you going, sweetie? Open the door!" she called to the man sitting in the living room. Swati earned another bonus just by sitting and sipping tea. She knew who was supporting her. "Jim, we need to talk. You can't run away. Swati!" I pushed her away and opened my car door while Allie gave up trying to hold me back. I ran down the hallway to the front door, opening the garage door as I went. I started to pull away, ducking under the windshield to avoid being seen by the man out of the corner of my eye. You see, one of my favorite movies was called Serving Sarah. It was a silly romantic comedy, memorable to me mostly because it starred Elizabeth Hurley and was one of the few date movies during our wrestling years. In it, the server played by Matthew Perry had to give Sarah divorce papers for money matters. The main idea was that the timing and place of serving the papers were crucial for both sides. Another thing was that in the 2 years I lived in the neighborhood, a stranger had never knocked on our door. It was always friends, hired help, or family. So the fact that just when my soon-to-be ex-wife was home, a stranger chose that moment to knock on the door made me uneasy. The other paper I found was a voting card from Allie Reynolds, sent to Andrew Schwartz about some stock. That was a clue for me. The issue was that Ali didn't own any shares, but I did. Well, to be fair, we both had the stock and she seemed determined to change that. I felt lucky she didn't just ignore me. It was funny she picked that specific movie. Until now, I hadn't linked my troubles with Carl and someone looking into Rilke with the fact that my wife was enjoying some time with my business partner. Now it all seemed to connect. Allie had enough access to my records to see how our new software was progressing. All the questions she asked over the last couple of weeks didn't feel so innocent anymore. Everything was almost ready, and I guessed that was exactly what they were waiting for to make a move against me. They were just unlucky. I had time to alert them before things went wrong. But what could I do? I realized I had automatically arrived at work. I parked my car and noticed Hector's convertible was there. Quick work. My mind was busy with new thoughts. I parked in Andrew's spot since he had a habit of using things without asking. I wasn't sure if the process server was following me or if another one was close by. So I rushed to the front door, slowing down just enough to drag my key across Hector's car, leaving a mark on the roof. I tried to ignore the thought of Hector being upset. I walked past security, and Jorge answered the phone but didn't stop me. When two business owners argue, it's hard to choose a side. I took the stairs to my floor and entered the office area. The atmosphere changed, conversations stopped, and typing slowed down. Mindy froze when she saw me and waved a paper in front of me. "What is this?" she asked. "Later, Mindy," I said. "Hector's in there!" she shouted after me. Inside, Hector was taking one of my diplomas off the wall and putting it in a box. "I didn't ask you to do that," I said. I grabbed him by the back of his tie and pulled him out. As I led him out of the office, he was breathing hard. I took one of his diplomas and pushed it with my foot so hard that a nearby cubicle wall fell over, making Gloria scream. Hector was busy, loosening his tie to catch his breath, and his face looked red. I tossed the diploma at him, and it hit him in the chest, breaking the glass frame. Mindy stood there, holding a paper on her skirt, both hands over her mouth in surprise. "Please hold my calls, sweetie," I said softly. She nodded, looking a bit lost. I stepped back into my office and tossed a box of things onto Hector, making a loud noise with the glass and electronics inside. I locked my door and drew the curtains closed. I could hear voices chatting outside. I had been running on automatic, but now I needed to think. It seemed like Andy and the other person had a plan. They probably spent all their spare time working on the divorce papers and getting the court to serve them. As I sat there, I logged onto my computer. An error message popped up. I tried again, typing slower this time. The login failed once more. If I tried again, the computer would lock me out. Hector, who could also access the system, had removed my password. He really had it coming. But being a computer whiz, I had a backup plan. Yep, I had an easy-to-remember password just in case. I closed the computer, unsure of what to do next. It had a proxy card that let Andy have power over the company's decisions. The four of us founders owned half the company shares. Most shares owned by investors didn't have voting rights, and the shares given to employees were also non-voting. So 2/3 of the voting shares belonged to the four of us. How did she get those shares? No way. According to the divorce papers, she might have been entitled to half of my shares. I couldn't face Andy unless I had Harry and Gordon on my side. That wouldn't be easy. If I managed to get one of them to switch to my side, I'd be equal with Andy. He might have already given them a few voting shares to keep them loyal. There was a knock at the door. "Jim? It's me, Gordon. Can we talk?" I worked closely with Gordon, so I opened the door. "Gordon, are you alone out there?" "What? Just open the door. We need to talk." I thought about it. "Do you know what that jerk and that other person did?" There was a moment of silence. "Look, it's messy. I know. People get distracted and feelings change, but you can't let this affect the business. I've worked way too hard for this to fall apart now." "What are you talking about?" I replied. "Andy told me they fell in love and want to get married." "I'm sorry. These things happen, but we can't afford bad publicity." I felt a rush of anger. "Are you joking? They're both messing with me and trying to take my company, and you want me to just accept it?" "It's just as much my company as it is yours," he raised his voice. "I won't let you ruin our big chance over a woman." I could hear some sighs outside the door, probably from our female team members. I paused for a moment. "Jim," he said a bit calmer, "are you there?" "Yeah, I'm here," I replied. "First of all, that woman was my wife, and I'm not the one who chose to put the company at risk for fun. I'm the one being affected here. If you want to blame someone, blame them." His voice softened. "I get it. Why don't you come out and talk?" An unfamiliar voice spoke up. "Are you his boss?" "If you are, I have something to say to you." "Forget it, Gordon, I know. Not the best day so far." What was I going to do if I stepped outside? I had a lot to lose, and they'd take over the company, but I couldn't stay here. The guards could open all the doors, and staying would only make things worse. Besides, how could I work with these people again after what they put me through? I had some pride left. Seeing that stuck-up guy Andrew would be too hard. No matter how much money he made, my hands shook. "Hey, stop it!" Mindy shouted to someone. The noise stopped. Okay, I was cornered. I was going to lose my share of the company one way or another. Then an idea hit me. That woman would get part of my money no matter what. But I didn't want either Andrew or Allie to benefit from my hard work. She didn't deserve it, and he shouldn't have a say in it. How could I change that? I grabbed my iPhone and called the number I had found. That's where it all started. "Hello? Hi, Randy, my name is Jim Reynolds. Can you help me with an order?" "Yes, sir," a young voice replied. "I want to sell about 1 million shares of Ipswich Inc. stock. My account number is 5,467 to 3,692. That's a lot of stock, sir. Are you sure?" "Yes, I want to sell them. These stocks are new and have a lot of potential. He was just trying to help me." "I know, but I just want to leave. I've made my money and I'm finished. Think about your commission." 2 minutes later, my phone beeped with a confirmation. A few minutes after that, I heard a woman outside and the sound of keys at my door. An unappealing man in a cheap suit came in, followed by a couple of unhappy security guards and Mindy. They looked confused as to why I was smiling while hugging the process server who was watching everything. Mindy was recording it on my phone. Part 3. I woke up Friday morning to find a young woman standing in my bedroom with a tray. "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds. Here's your breakfast," she said. "That's great, thank you. Who are you?" I asked. "I'm Prati," she said, smiling. I nodded, though it didn't mean much to me. I looked at the tray. The only thing I recognized was coffee. Next to it were white pancakes and something red. "Thank you, Prati. What's this?" I asked. "It's breakfast," she replied. "Yes, but what is breakfast?" I wondered. "It's the morning meal, silly," she giggled. I was puzzled. I wasn't about to turn down a nice surprise. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "It's teacher convention day and my grandmother is watching me. Is that okay?" She seemed worried. "Well, you're welcome. Do we have any regular food?" She giggled again. "I'll ask my grandmother. She doesn't know how to make American food." She took one of my pancakes, dipped it in the red filling, and popped it into her mouth. "It's wrong to waste food," she said boldly. "Well, enjoy it. No coffee for you." I spent the day talking to lawyer friends to find out the name of a good divorce lawyer. Believe it or not, I didn't trust any of the 3 corporate lawyers who had worked with us, especially Harry. That trust document had to come from somewhere. Have you ever tried to call a lawyer? This is a lawsuit. After several hours of phone calls, I finally got a hold of my friend Judith. I explained what was happening, and she felt sorry for me at first, but then got to the point. "Do you want a lamb, a pit bull, or a fox?" she asked. I was confused. "What do you mean?" "It's simple," she explained. "A lamb does everything smoothly and tries to make everyone happy. This can help in a divorce. I don't usually suggest them, but they might be good for you if you want a peaceful end." "Next," I said, determined. "What about the pit bull?" "The pit bull likes to fight. If you want to really go after your spouse, this is your choice, but be ready for a tough time. If you pick a pit bull, be prepared to get hurt too." She paused. "They just want to win." "And the fox?" I asked, curious. I had never thought of lawyers having different styles. "The fox sees the whole picture. They don't always fight when talking works better. A pit bull will fight no matter what. A fox, though, will try different ways, including fighting if needed." "So I want a fox, right?" "You might think so, but foxes are hard to find, and they can sometimes be too clever for their own good. They're not as gentle as a lamb or as fierce as a pit bull." I thought about the challenges I would face in my divorce. "I don't think I have a choice. I want a fox." "It's likely to get complicated. There's one more thing about foxes," she continued. "They're very popular in the legal world." "Excuse me?" "Lots of good-looking lawyers want a big client base, so they get to choose their clients. I'll give you a few names, but it's up to you to get them to work with you. I'll take my chances." As it turned out, Rolling Thurman Esquire was happy to take my case. One of his clients had an emergency and left him open. The law can be strange. We met and talked for a long time. He gave me a lot of things to think about. I got home a little after 4 o'clock. Swati was at the door and Property was beside her, looking a bit uncomfortable. The woman frowned. "Mr. Reynolds, Miss Allie came with a man and took some things." "Took things? What kind?" I asked. "Clothes, jewelry, your laptop." I rushed into the room. My laptop was still in its case on the table. "It's still here, sweetie." "No, the pink one," she said. "Oh, that's hers. She shouldn't keep her belongings." I sighed. "If this is the worst thing, you should change the locks." She replied firmly, "Yes, oh, call a locksmith. I will leave that to you." She looked at me and said, "What?" "I need money." I felt a bit silly and reached into my wallet. I handed her a couple of $100 bills. Allie usually dealt with those bills. She gently patted my shoulder. "Don't worry, Mr. Reynolds. I'll take care of it." I could smell food cooking and hear music from the kitchen. A woman was singing in a foreign language on the radio. I peeked into the kitchen and saw another Indian woman standing over a stack of pots and pans filled with delicious smells. "Hi, Mr. Reynolds." "Hi." My life felt more confusing by the minute. Swati was behind me again. "Mr. Reynolds, the phone has been ringing all day. Did you answer it?" "No, Mr. Reynolds." Her voice showed how annoyed she was with Mr. Andrew. "Not a big deal," I said, agreeing with her. I went to the den to check my messages. I had just sat down when Prouty came in with iced tea on a tray. Here you go, Mr. Reynolds. Thank you, Prouty. I'd prefer something stronger. Would you like a stronger tea, Mr. Reynolds? The idea of drinking in front of a child felt wrong, so I changed my mind. Never mind. Who was in the kitchen? That's the cook you wanted, Mr. Reynolds. A cook? What do you mean? You wanted American food, so Grandma hired Trippy. I never said to hire anyone, I said, but the food smelled good. We'll talk about it later. I checked the answering machine. I heard Andrew's voice. You son of a gun, what have you done? The insurers are calling and they're not happy. I told you not to sell until I got the go-ahead. Call me now. We need to fix this. Beep? That's the second message. I know I might have made a mistake, but it's no reason to act like this. You need to call me right away. They're upset and want to know why you disrupted everything. You signed the papers and then you did this. We need to fix this by the end of the trading day. What should I say? Beep. How about you tell them you took care of my wife, huh? I heard Property giggle while she stood there. I'm sorry, Property. Please don't tell your grandmother. It's okay. I hear everything at school. Here's your tea. She offered me another glass. I kept listening while sipping my tea slowly. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon in my time zone. Why don't you have your phone on? Because I don't want to talk to you, jerk. I decided to be careful with my words, too. They were discussing legal aid. Is this some sort of strange revenge? It seemed Andrew was having a rough day, and that made me feel a bit better, even if I didn't know why. There were a lot more messages, but I really didn't want to hear any more right now. I was about to get on the computer and look something up when I heard a shout from the front door. Mr. Reynolds, someone is here to see you, Swati said in an odd tone. I walked to the front door and found Mindy standing there looking quite serious. Hey, Mindy, how are you? I asked. First things first, tell that jerk I'm not what he thinks, and I got fired. Swati frowned. I peeked outside, and I saw a man with a turban and a mustache. He raised his hand to greet me. This is Mr. Singh, Swati said. He will watch the house until my cousin can fix the locks. She spoke like it was perfectly normal. When can your cousin fix the locks? I asked. When he gets out of prison, of course. I turned to Mindy for a clearer explanation. Let's talk in the room. Is Miss staying for dinner? Asked Swati. I glanced at Mindy. She shrugged and nodded. Yes. A loud voice came from the kitchen, and just as loudly, someone replied. I held Mindy's elbow gently, leading her into my den. Would you like something to drink? Preeti asked. Mindy shook her head and looked at me. How many people work for you? She asked. I think just one. She gave me a look like she doubted me. Are you sure? I hesitated, so I decided to change the topic. What happened after security walked me out? I asked. She laughed. I can't believe you did that to Hector. Anyway, Mr. Schwartz yelled at me for a while. Then he told everyone that Hector would take over your tasks because you were having personal issues. When I asked what he meant, she implied the job was stressing me out. She rolled her eyes. I don't know how he got that idea. So what's happening? Well, I saw Allie and Andrew. I paused, looking for the girl who seemed ready to shock me with something big. It felt like she was going to hit me with a divorce notice just after we wrapped up the new project and handed my voting rights to Andrew. That's what all this office trouble was about. Andrew was picking on me, and Hector seemed to know it was coming. That idiot. Her eyes sparkled, and she tossed her brown hair back. We could hear some noise from inside the house. Which one? She asked, tilting her head. I guess I have many to choose from. Did she really do that to you? She felt sorry for me. What are you going to do now? I couldn't help but laugh a little. I don't think things will turn out as they hoped, but I'm getting a divorce. I grimaced. The last few days had really been tough. She held my hand and looked at me with a serious face. What happened was wrong. You didn't deserve that. I'm sorry I'm here to vent. My problems aren't so big. Can you at least give me a good reference? After thinking for a moment, I nodded. I had one more question. How did the staff react? It was her turn to pause. No one knows what's happening. The fun of being out in public is gone. They just know that you had a fight with Hector and that Andrew is acting like you don't exist. There was a lot of yelling today. The top bosses, Mr. Jenkins, Loeb, and Schwartz, have been talking all day. Greta Schwartz's assistant told me some of this. You're not popular with them right now for some reason, I replied, except in my heart. She continued, no one is happy, but they still have to work. You know how tough the economy is. It was nice to be in a place where things were going well. I hope they managed to pull through. What's next for you? I asked. What do you mean? She replied. I mean, what will happen with you and the company? She looked at me closely. Well, I've already received divorce papers, and I won't be working with Andrew anymore since he won't resign. So I guess I'm out of there. As for the company, that's not my worry now. Are you going to be okay? I sighed and nodded. You know, it's just a divorce. It happens a lot. I'm not unwell. I'm still the programmer I used to be. I can find a job I enjoy. I've helped the company earn a lot of money. It hurts, and I'm angry at both of them, but life moves on. I'd love to drink to forget, but I realized that maybe that was why Swati brought her granddaughter here, to help me cope. Her granddaughter was very pretty. But I don't think your wife is nice, I said, and I think she's not very smart. Andrew isn't respectful or responsible. He knows her true colors. At Mr. Reynolds' dinner, we agreed to set aside my marriage troubles, and I actually enjoyed the meal. It was shrimp and curry, and I had never tasted anything like it. Afterwards, she showed me around the house, making little compliments. Looking at a stack of photos made me chuckle, and we decided to keep in touch. In the next chapter, since I didn't have to write code for my old job anymore, I changed my schedule. This meant I woke up at 1 o'clock in the morning. That's when the front door opened and a strange man in overalls walked in. He waved at me. Hello, Mr. Reynolds. Then he began to take apart the locks. I moved to the windows, checking for any police or marshals outside. Did they let you out of jail? I asked. He looked at me with confusion. Yes, Mr. Reynolds. Good. I hope the bail wasn't too high. He looked very hurt and quietly said something in Hindi. Then he walked out, leaving me with new keys and refusing to take any money. The weekend went by with lots of phone calls. I started by calling my mom. This turned into a long talk. She wanted to come to California, but I told her my house was already full with people, which needed a bit of explaining. She got upset and said some harsh things about Allie, who she used to like a lot. You have to give it to Allie. She made a great first impression. Too bad her character wasn't so good. I should have noticed that. She always seemed very practical about our relationship, which should have raised a red flag. Still, I thought we shared some real feelings. Looks like I was only partly right. Next, I wrote Carl a long letter explaining everything that had happened. I told him just because I wasn't working there anymore, it didn't mean we had to cut ties. I reminded him he had a girlfriend now, and he should think about both of their needs. I suggested he talk to Sheila before acting too quickly. I even joked that he could take Hector's place. Swati showed up in the morning. Sweetie, don't you rest on weekends? I thought she wasn't around when it was only Allie and me. Do you need me for cleaning, Mr. Reynolds? Did Pradeep fix the locks? Yes, he did, thank you. I didn't say anything more. I didn't feel great about a criminal fixing my locks. What's he doing now? I asked. He's back in jail. Is he on a work release program? Not that one. He's working there. It's a good job. He's a locksmith. You know, maybe Allie was right about my social skills. Fortunately, Swati had some things with her again, so I could say sorry for my foolishness last night, with her helping to translate. She thought it was funny. They stayed the whole weekend along with Tripti, my new cook. My plans to play Xbox and drink whiskey didn't happen. I still had one unpleasant task left. Allie and I had a busy social schedule, mostly thanks to her. We had planned to visit an art gallery with another couple, Phil and Terry, from last weekend's party. How much had things changed in just 1 week? I called Terry and told her straightforwardly that Allie and I were getting divorced. I said I caught her being unfaithful with the previous owner and sadly wouldn't be able to attend the opening. Yes, I felt very embarrassed, but I didn't want to hide the truth. Since we had just met, Terry found it awkward to ask more questions, but she made sympathetic noises and quickly said goodbye. Monday came, and even though I felt overwhelmed by my job and my marriage, it was nice to wake up late without being responsible to anyone. My good mood lasted until 10 o'clock when there was another knock at the door. The same bailiff, now in a different cheap suit, stood in front of me. "You've received a subpoena," he said, showing me the envelope. His eyes were jumping around nervously, likely searching for the next odd secretary or photographer. "Listen, I already got the divorce papers. Or don't you remember?" I asked. "How could I forget?" he replied, looking down. "Why don't you read the papers and wish me a good day?" He muttered this as he walked away. I thought this might harden me a bit. I began reading the documents. It looked like my main bank was suing me for breaking the lockup agreement. I had just finished reading when the doorbell rang again. Next chapter, I thought. "Are you Mr. James Reynolds?" a young blonde woman with acne scars asked, looking at me with wide eyes. We moved the picnic table to my backyard. Mindy, Roland, and I sat behind it, spreading out piles of papers. Yes, please give the summons to Miss Johnson there. I will sign for it," I said. "Who is this subpoena from?" I asked. "It's from Troy Anderson. He's asking for damages for the lockdown," Mindy said in a flat tone. "Do you get served often?" the woman asked. "You have no idea," I replied honestly. I had been served with subpoenas since early that morning. After the third bailiff came by, I called Mindy and Mr. Thurman for help with my divorce. We moved everything outside. It was a nice California day. Why not enjoy it? I thought. The woman walked away, muttering to herself. "I admire how you managed through such a mess, Mr. Reynolds. And thanks for getting me out of the office today," my lawyer said. "Don't mention it. Every time I think it can't get worse, it does. So I'll just smile and let it go," I replied. "How many subpoenas now, Mindy?" I asked as she took out her notebook. She bit her lower lip, thinking. 8 from the insurers, 3 from Ipswich, 1 for property damage, 1 for a hostile work environment, and another for acting against company interests as the board requires, plus Hector's civil suit, and 1 to stop the transfer of community property. A bit late for that, if you ask me. That makes 13 in total, she said. Next chapter, I thought again. When a company goes public, it goes to a bank to sell shares. The bank can do this better than we can. They don't tell us how to fix computers, and we don't tell them how to sell stocks. When a company first goes public, it doesn't want to overwhelm the market with shares. The bank and the company both make money this way by selling shares and keeping control over the amount on the market. Our worth, at least on paper, was about $50 million. If we offered 50 million shares, it would only be worth $1 a share. So only a small piece of the company was sold at first to test the market and try to set a better price. Since the owners usually held most of the company's shares, they had to agree to a lockup deal. This meant that I couldn't sell any of my shares for at least 3 months. Our company had about 8 million shares total, and we only sold 1 million at first. Unfortunately, by my actions, I unintentionally doubled the number of shares available, which cut the share price by half. I want to make this clear. I had no idea what I was doing. I had been signing papers for days. I left all the business details to Harry and Andrew, thinking their advice was best for me. But that doesn't change the fact that I was wrong. My goal was to leave the company with my dignity and what I owned, while keeping my wife from getting her share of the company I built, and stopping Andrew from taking control and cheating others. It didn't matter that Gordon had suddenly acted like a dishonest person. He shouldn't benefit from his betrayal, and I had no other plans, nor did I expect things to turn out like they did. Part 3. The big subpoenas happened because many people were angry with me. Most underwriters share the risk, so we had 1 main underwriter and 7 others selling shares too, including, I'm proud to say, Goldman Sachs. I have to admit it made me feel a bit proud to be sued by such a well-known company. I knew I was in the wrong, but legal cases take a long time, especially in big companies. More personal issues came up. The judge sat at his desk while a stenographer took notes. Bryson Coopersmith stood for the other side, and he was really putting on a show. His actions were sneaky and hurtful to my case. He sold his valuable assets just to keep my client from getting her fair share. I shared many examples of how a successful tech IPO should be priced in its early months. I wasn't really paying attention to him, considering Roland Thurman. He sat in front of the judge, his gray hair forming a kind of halo. His glasses rested on his head, and his chin drooped to his chest while his hands rested on his rounded belly. I wanted to kick him, but I held back. I had enough to worry about with the charges against me. Given how the past month had gone, this wouldn't have been surprising. Plus, to make things worse, he gave me back the signed divorce papers along with all the shares he finished. It was real, and it almost made me want to stop using Mr. Thurman as my attorney. We read the divorce papers 3 times. Then on Wednesday, after she gave me the papers, Thurman had me not only sign the decree, but also purchase 500,000 shares of Ipswich Inc. stock to give to my wife. Luckily, Prouty wasn't home when I made my decision to buy and transfer the shares. The judge looked at Mr. Coopersmith in disbelief. "Didn't your client give these documents to Mr. Reynolds?" the judge asked. "Exactly, Your Honor," Thurman replied from his chair. "They were filed according to the current rules of the company, not after Mr. Reynolds hurt the company with his bad actions. Those actions were not illegal. This is a civil case. And as Mr. Coopersmith knows, investing in IPOs, especially in tech companies, is quite risky. When I sold the stock, I really did it at the top of the market. We started with a price of $6 per share. By the time we sold, we ended up with $1 per share, making $7 million. My lawyer convinced me to buy back 500,000 shares of Ipswich Inc. to settle the divorce, but the stock had dropped to $2.50 each by that time. So instead of getting the $3.5 million she thought she would, she received $1.25 million in stock and another $500,000 in real estate, furniture, and bills. She spoke of the total number of shares, not the exact value. I believe she got much more than she deserved, yet suddenly she had to show that giving her exactly what she wanted was a bad idea. It was a mixed feeling since I saved $1 million but had to give her the stock she wanted so badly. This change of plans also affected my stance on allowing Andrew to take over the company, which I had strongly opposed. Thurman had talked to me a lot about this before the meeting. "Listen, Jim, you're already out. Why do you care who is in charge? It will help you keep your money. And if what you say about Mr. Schwartz is true, they'll regret this." I felt uneasy about it, but I decided to sign the papers. A big stack of papers landed on the judge's desk. "What's this?" he asked. "If I'm right," Thurman said without opening his eyes, "this is Mr. Reynolds' response to the claims of manipulation and trickery. You'll see records showing that the day after she learned of her husband's unfaithfulness, Mrs. Reynolds used $50,000 on credit cards to buy clothes, jewelry, and cash. So my question for Mr. Coopersmith is, does he object to a spouse making careless and harmful choices that affect the other spouse, or only when my client does so?" "Your Honor," Bryson protested. "He's right, lawyer. You're asking for a change to your own agreement." More back and forth continued, but nothing new was decided. As the lawyers were leaving with Mr. Thurman, I asked, "Do you think we can get away with this?" "No way. This is California. If you want fairness, get divorced in Ohio next time." "But now the responsibility is all on them, and they will likely get less than half of what they want. Judges are human sometimes. They sometimes support clever tricks and fair consequences if it's allowed by law." He looked at his watch and grabbed his briefcase. "I need to get some statements, so I'll talk to you later." This was really tough. I wanted to talk about a few things that Allie didn't mention in her divorce papers. I was thinking about bringing home some KFC when I caught a whiff of her perfume. "Hi, Allie. I didn't have to say that our lawyers would be very upset if they saw us just chatting. But what were the chances of that happening anyway? Jimmy, what do you want?" My patience was running low, but I was a bit curious too. A part of me hoped she would regret her choice. I wanted her to feel like she made a big mistake. Hearing that would make me feel better. I even wished she would want to get back together. But I didn't want to give her any false hopes. Most of the time, anyway. Old memories and my feelings made me think of silly ideas. "And don't call me that." "Okay," she replied with a smirk. "Mr. Reynolds, I haven't spoken to you in ages." Her laughter made me feel a little better, which was probably her plan. She still knew how to get to me. She must have been clever enough to trick my eyes. I needed to keep my guard up, but I wanted answers. I took my phone out and checked my calendar. "I don't have to go back to work until 4. Do you want to get coffee?" She nodded slowly, but with a hint of excitement. At least that's how it seemed to me. We went to a cafe in the courtyard and found a quiet table. She was wearing a lovely silk blouse that I hadn't seen before. She looked modest, and hiding her high heels was probably a smart choice. "Nice blouse?" I tried to sound casual, but she noticed how tense I was when I said that. She sighed. "This whole thing is a mess. I know what you're thinking, and you're partly right. You surprised us. We didn't know what you were planning to do, whether you'd file a restraining order or send someone to handle things. So we had to come up with a plan ourselves." She complained that I had made sure to gather enough things to last her for a while. There was a sale at Walmart, I said dryly. You didn't need to go to Saks. But I get where you're coming from. Understand? She asked. Yes. Andrew has a bad habit of not taking care of his partner. That's why he's still single. She inhaled sharply. That's not okay. We're talking about marriage. Well, I'm glad you're not going to throw away a good marriage for something pointless. So what's your plan? Looking into her coffee, Allie tried to collect her thoughts. It wasn't supposed to turn out like this. You were meant to finish things right? Like the company was supposed to succeed. We would have had more arguments. I would have asked for a divorce. After we talked, you would have a chance to heal. I could share my thoughts with Andrew, and we could move on without ruining our work together. I didn't want to hurt you more than needed. Andrew felt the same way. Yes, he cared for you. When did you two start to have fun together? It just happened. Does it really matter? I don't want to dwell on it. Andy is like me. We get along in ways you and I didn't. It matters because it feels like your plan was to keep him busy until everything changed. I see you both as unfaithful. The pressure from the business deal was an excuse for the divorce. You didn't prepare anything in advance. I remember us as a couple. So what went wrong? Nothing, she said with frustration. That's the problem. Nothing changed. You're still the same guy I married back in school. You play your video games and watch those silly movies. It's a challenge to get you out of the house for social events, to act like an adult. Are you saying we're getting divorced because of my hobbies? Because I don't want to go to wine tastings or boring shows? You want to end things because I don't like fancy cheeses? My fists tightened with anger. You're trying to make me seem like the bad person. I'm not. I wanted a true partner, someone who valued my needs. We were supposed to grow up together, but you haven't changed. I grew up and wanted more. Starting a big business before turning 37 is important to me. I'm proud of what we've achieved, she said softly. I'm not saying you're a bad person. You're a good person, but you're just not right for me. I can't believe this, I said in shock. We are together. I've made many sacrifices. Those late nights you were gone. Those loans we took to get by and trying to feed us with our small paychecks. During those cold, lonely nights, my friends who are married to successful people would ask me out. But I couldn't join them because I didn't have enough money. I had to socialize with important investors. Enough, she said firmly. She noticed my expression. I was networking, not doing anything wrong. What do you call a woman who flatters her business partner to get ahead? I deserve my share of what we built, she replied, her voice rising. You think talking to people is something special. You've seen how hard I work. I spent long hours coding. You know how much I put into this? 18 hours a day. I know it affected our marriage, but I did it. You didn't do it in a fancy dress to impress anyone. You're just selling yourself. And certainly not Andrew. You can keep pushing a poor product, but it won't improve without my work. He would be selling cars in Fresno or doing something similar. Some people sleep alone in bed for many years, and it doesn't change anything like I hoped it would. If I hadn't helped you, you wouldn't have achieved what you did. I stood by you, took care of you, and looked after you when you were unwell. I was a good partner. Yes, a good partner. And yet, as soon as you felt free, you left me behind. I raised my hands to stop her words. It hurts, but I can see that you wanted out of our marriage. Sometimes things don't go as planned, but there are rules to follow when it ends. We argue, we go to court, the lawyers make a deal. Maybe you get part of the company and more money, or maybe we just split everything down the middle. But you should have ended the marriage because you were unhappy. Not because you chose to love someone else, and definitely not before you started enjoying time with someone else. Marriage means you stop looking elsewhere. It doesn't mean you run away at the first chance. I don't think you are unkind, but I do think you took something from me. I hoped you would realize it's time to make a fair offer through your lawyer. But her response was cold. I'm being as fair as you are. Tell me, did it never occur to you that Andrew might just be using you to take over the company? She smiled at me like I was foolish. I'm not stupid. I've thought about it, but it doesn't matter now. She smoothed her outfit. I'm a great catch. I'm easy to be with, and I'm attractive. I can choose who I want to be with. And if Andrew is foolish enough to leave me, I'll be fine. I'll still have my shares. The proxy card can be taken back, and it won't be hard to find someone new. Yeah. Or a similar word that starts with S. Her face grew angry. I stepped off the chair. I'll consider your suggestions. I said politely. Jim. She looked at me with pleading eyes. This doesn't have to be a mess. Let's act like adults. You mean turn things around to get your way? Sure. I needed to get away from her. I knew she was practical. But what's that saying? Being very practical can lead to being cold-hearted. That thought seemed true. I walked out of the courthouse and took out my phone. Nice blouse, said the person on the other end. Allie was right about one thing. It was time for me to start acting my age. In the next chapter, it was a steady stream of business news, both good and bad. It meant that the legal issues of our initial public offering, IPO, got a lot of attention on Bloomberg and CNBC. Andrew must have been worried about it, but I noticed that the press comments suddenly started calling me a scammer in the tech field. The commentators on Squawk Box wondered if I hadn't actually written the code, that I had waited for a good stock price and then sold my shares illegally. They claimed I was laughing all the way to the bank, leaving my struggling employees to take care of themselves. Since I wasn't really a business person, I didn't think much about it. My mother, bless her heart, finally asked me how I could ignore the media. If I don't look out for myself, who will? Well, besides Swati and some friends. After talking to Allie, I realized that Andrew wouldn't back down. He was going to fight with words and sales. I could sneak into Relock using my secret code and cause a lot of trouble, but everyone would blame me, and that wouldn't be fair. I didn't want to destroy the company. I just wanted Andrew and Allie to feel some hurt. First, I reached out to Allie's lawyer to get a phone number. Next, I checked my calendar. I had done many business interviews leading up to the IPO. Maybe it was time to talk to them again. In the next scene, an unpleasant man sat down across from me, looking nervous. It was the same bailiff. He was bald and had a thick lower lip with rough facial features. I had met him many times. "Would you like some tea?" I asked. "I'm fine. Sorry about the other day. I just had a few things to finish before you served me." "It's okay. It was an interesting day for me. Plus, I get paid for mileage." I chuckled and started using Google Maps. "What are you doing?" he asked, licking his lips. "Maximizing my profits," I replied, handing him an envelope. In the next scene, Mr. Reynolds spoke up. "It's Miss Allie on the phone." I wondered what that was about and smirked. I could guess a few things. "You jerk! You are unbelievable!" she shouted. "Hey, Allie, how are you? Still enjoying your time with Andrew?" A noise came from the hallway. "How could you do this to me? I've been your wife for almost 11 years. "I could ask you the same thing, babe. Did you tell them what we talked about? Those pictures? That was just between us. Car dealers trying to sell me a good life. Photographers follow me everywhere. And my mother? Oh my God, my mother? You make me look terrible. Please, just please," I said softly. "You didn't need my help. But while we're at it, who's spreading these bad stories about me in the news?" I didn't answer. Since you two used your connections to hurt my reputation, I decided to get my side of the story out there too. I didn't think it would become such a big deal. You should be flattered by the attention. I'm just helping you look at your options. Remember how much time Deborah LaFave was in the news? All I could do was let out a frustrated scream. Then the line went dead. She didn't like that I had shared our conversation with reporters. I had always been proud of her beauty. Now I could share that pride. Overall, it was a good day. But now, let's talk about Andrew. Allie had ended our relationship, and I was determined to claim my share of the business no matter what. I couldn't help but think about how that awful guy had managed to win her over. She mentioned looking for a partner, but she never told me. A day later, I received his call. "Why did you ask for help at my gym?" His tone was cautious. Good. I didn't need to explain that I chose that gym because it was the farthest from where a bailiff would look. His kids had piano lessons there, and that sneaky guy might think it was some clever plan to embarrass him. Let him wonder. "Oh, great. He knows you're there. What does it feel like to be caught off guard? Is this a game of cheap revenge?" "No, I consider it a very expensive kind of revenge. What do you mean by that?" "The latest version of our software is mine. You can't just take it. That would hurt the company. I'm not stopping you from using anything made by the competition. However, since I'm no longer part of the company, I believe I deserve some credit for my work." Cliff, the tough lawyer, found Andrew at the gym with a letter in hand. I had created our software with a little help from Carl, and it was mine. I had licensed it from a bigger company because I worried they might not succeed. I wanted to be ready to pass my work on to another company if needed. After all, I had a family to take care of. The irony was hard to bear. As one of the founders, I had a lot of stock in the company, so all our earnings went to me. I chose to reinvest any profits, but I never signed anything that gave away my rights. And there was a strong legal argument that all the versions of the software I worked on also belonged to me. Just like a famous character in a book, I still owned my work, even if others used it. "We need to find a solution. What do you want?" I asked. "I want my wife and my company back," he replied. "But they're both mixed up with someone untrustworthy." That was not going to happen. "How's the stock price looking?" I asked. "You're unbelievable. See you in court." It seemed like Ali was only interested in the money. His tone grew more uneasy. "Let's leave the past behind. If you and the investors drop the lawsuits, we can agree on a fair settlement." "How am I supposed to do that? How do I convince my wife to come back?" "You'll think of something," he said. I didn't mention the financial backers. I pointed out calmly that I would deal with them myself. It was time to push a bit harder. "Oh, and one more thing. You should talk to your lawyer about not contesting the divorce." "I don't want to interfere with your personal life," he began. My laugh cut him off. I could see he wasn't ready to defend Ali. "You got yourself into this situation. If there were lawsuits for hurting someone's feelings in California, you might be facing one right now. And it could even be caught on video. She wouldn't want that to happen. That's not my concern. If you don't cooperate, we'll have to talk about legal action. Once my divorce is over, she won't get any of that money. It wasn't part of her divorce agreement. Ali was in a tight spot. She asked that our money be put on hold until everything was settled. We could only get small amounts. I was getting a bit more because I was managing the house, and she was not. Since she was using her credit cards heavily, she needed the money. If this caused trouble for their festival or their cute relationship, I felt a bit sorry, but not too much. As for me, I was enjoying selling things I didn't want on eBay and was surprised by some of the prices I was getting. I knew I'd find out more later, but right now I didn't care and she didn't know what I was doing. "Why are you acting this way? If you harm the company, you'll hurt a lot of people, not just us two. It's funny how you never thought about that while making your plans. Don't act like you deserve sympathy, Andy. It won't work. I don't want to talk about this. You have my letter. Think it over carefully. Now let's move on. I've had my fun up to now. Yes, they betrayed me, but I hit back hard, both financially and emotionally. If Andrew wanted to save his company, he should have convinced Ali to agree to her financial tricks. If she wanted the stock, she had to make it worth something. She needed to ensure the company was really valuable, but she just got hurt in public and wanted her payment. I didn't think Andrew felt much pity for her situation. From what I knew, there were always reporters nearby taking pictures of them to avoid angering her. I mentioned in my letter that I was being approached about movie rights. That wasn't true, but why should I care? You can imagine how she reacted. My view started changing when an unexpected visitor came to see me. I had just returned from my morning run and was enjoying some fresh watermelon juice. I was getting breakfast ready for Dolly, and Swati was having one of his many tea breaks. The doorbell rang, and we all exchanged looks. Was it another process server? Swati frowned and stood up to answer it. "Mr. Reynolds, this is Mr. Loeb." Harry Loeb, my former business partner, walked into my kitchen. He wore a polo shirt and slacks instead of his usual formal outfit. "Hello, Harry. What brings you here?" He looked a bit down. "Shouldn't you be at work? Busy with important papers or something?" He sighed. "We missed you at the last couple of board meetings." I laughed. "Not a chance." I paused, curious. "What do you mean?" "I mean that you were never kicked off the board. I can't believe that wasn't the first thing you did. After I was out, I came here to hear your side of the story. When Schwartz told me you had turned against us, I was really mad at you. You broke the rules and put the whole company in a bad spot. I was the one who made those motions and planned to take action against you." He went quiet. I could feel the tension. But then I saw the news with Ali, and it made me think. Andrew said that the two of them were interested in each other and that you were excited about their friendship. I found that hard to believe, but I also found it hard to believe that you would hurt Hector and kick him out of your office. Anyone can reach a breaking point. I thought about it. You're right. It's been a stressful few days. Why don't you tell me what happened? I shared my story. I talked about people knowing things they shouldn't, people going to Carl to take care of Riddick, and about seeing Allie and Andy together. I offered to show him the video, but he said no. I showed him the voting card, and he read it without speaking. Looks like this is Jenkins's doing. I always thought he was slippery. I didn't agree to this and had no idea. When I saw those reports with Ali and the clips from the tapes, I asked Andy a few questions, but it wasn't needed because Ali answered his home phone. So what are you going to do about Jenkins? Nothing. Nothing? Why not? Because as soon as I heard her voice and listened to his crazy excuses, I quit as the company's lawyer. I don't want to work with someone like that. Hearing this, I put down my drink and covered my face, trying to get myself together. This was embarrassing. Really embarrassing. Was my temper really that out of control? Nothing I had done so far took much effort. All I had to do was react. I knew my own flaws. As soon as I felt I could keep myself from looking foolish, I reached over and hugged him. "Thanks," I said softly. "Hey, don't look at me like that. It's not like I sold my stocks or gave up my board seat. I'm a lawyer. Plus, I want to focus more on my golf game. Would you like a drink?" I finally remembered to offer. Moving on. It was a serious talk. It looked like Riley had to be delayed, and the income they thought would come in never showed up. The programming team was on edge. Hector never got over the embarrassment of me kicking him out of my office. His sudden rise hurt others. They weren't working as well. Plus, it looked like Carl quit too. Before he got Sheila, he was very focused. He spent hours coding. Some employees had gone to Ohio to try to convince him to stay by offering him a big pay raise. "Does your friend have Tourette's syndrome and swear a lot?" "What's going on with Harry?" I asked. Even though they hadn't met him, they had a sense of what he was dealing with. "No, it's just some twitching and noises," I said, feeling a bit ashamed. "Then it's not Tourette's syndrome," Harry replied flatly. I felt sorry for Carl for bringing him into this. Carl really had it rough. Joel and Mark mentioned that if it weren't for his girlfriend, they wouldn't have felt safe staying. They refused to go back. "What about Gordon?" I asked. He stared down at his Diet Coke. "Gordon is in a tough situation. His wife loves to spend money just like yours, and he hasn't managed to control her spending," he said. "He's young, just like you. He's also more emotional. I know he didn't find out about the affair until things got really bad." He frowned. "So, are Gordon and Andy still running the company?" I asked. He nodded. "They are facing money issues and problems with staff." "What do you mean?" I asked. "Several investors are raising concerns. If they could sell their shares, they would," he said. "Phil Turner is leading that group." "Phil?" I responded, not believing it. "He doesn't care that Andy is involved with a married woman. He's more upset that Andy got involved with one of his closest business friends. It's probably not just a coincidence that she has a nice little family. Andy's parties are less likely to be attended by his business partners. If the men aren't okay with it, their wives definitely aren't. I heard Marge say that Harry's wife fully supports your decision about the job. She wants you to know that if you need help, she'll be there." "Please thank her for me," I said. "What about the staff?" I asked. "A lot of people have left because of everything going on. I'm not sure why. There's not enough money coming in, and some suppliers have gone to our competitors," he explained. He looked at me curiously, but I didn't have answers. "Things are not looking good, and they've let some people go." "That's awful," I said. "But what can you do? They just want to stop the losses." "I'm not blaming you for that," I said, feeling it was all just terrible. We promised to stay in touch, and he left, apologizing for a situation that wasn't really his fault. I emailed Carl to thank him for his support. He quickly replied, "Don't worry, I'm not working for them anymore. I can't believe the terrible things they're saying about you on the news." "I'm working to fix that, Carl. What is going on?" I thought to myself. I started to feel sick to my stomach. It wasn't just Carl causing this feeling. I began to have trouble sleeping too. You'd think with all these lawsuits, a divorce, betrayal, and money issues, I shouldn't be able to sleep at all. Luckily, I had avoided most of the problems so far. There had been some nights when I needed a little comfort to help me relax, but lately it felt like things had gotten worse. So much so that I was starting to find myself in stressful thoughts again. I even switched to decaf coffee to cope. The girls were always sharp. One day, Prouty looked up from my laptop and said, "Mr. Reynolds, you're on YouTube." She was supposed to be doing her homework. I stepped closer to see the screen. Carl was there, clearly upset. He was fidgeting, and every few words he seemed to yelp. He had made a video where he criticized the press and talked about how great I was for giving him his first job and introducing him to his soon-to-be wife. This was my best friend who always struggled with asking for money when we were working hard outside, trying to stay visible by giving interviews to the media. "Why don't you go play outside?" I said, my voice rough. "Mr. Reynolds, I still have homework to finish," she replied. I was puzzled. Carl hadn't mentioned he was getting married, and now he was leaving his job and getting attention from me. Here I was, the guy who had ignored him at the reunion because I was focused on Rebecca Goldstein. I had often embarrassed Carl in front of Allie and asked him to help build our company without any pay. He wasn't the only one affected. He had lost his job, and so had Gloria, a single mom, Mindy and George from security, who was adding to his pension. Many workers from our company were in trouble, and it sounded like others were worried too. When we started this business, we had responsibilities to our employees. I might not have started it all, but my choices added to their problems. Just because I had issues with Andrew and Allie didn't mean I should harm anyone else. I recalled Judith's advice from a month ago. If you choose a fight, be ready for the pain. That's what they did. They only knew how to fight. I was so focused on winning and creating trouble that I didn't realize that there were innocent people suffering. Andrew was right, even if he was using the truth for his own gain. My actions hurt many people. I needed to fix this. Moving to the next step, I prepared a letter to the company saying I wouldn't ask for any money back in the next 18 months. I wasn't giving up my rights, but I didn't want my actions to tie up their money right now. We turned to the stock market to raise funds, spending over $500,000. The stock price dropped, and Andy was having a hard time getting new investors. Business people preferred honesty and reliability, things that Andy couldn't provide. Those who were single often faced divorce, and Andy was a mess with divorce cases. As for Allie, I wrote her a letter saying that I would agree to split things 50-50ths if she unfroze the funds. I was even willing to sign a paper to make it official. There were many doubts in the air, but I did my best to calm her down. With Thurman's help, I finally got a list of names from HR and checked the company directory. Mindy had really helped when I started my new project. As soon as everything was back to normal, I wrote a check to Carl. He had worked for me for 2 years without pay. He wasn't the best at his job back then, but I wanted to give him a fair amount, taking inflation into account, so he would have some good money. I hoped he would see it as an early gift for his upcoming wedding. I told him he should think seriously about the job offer he got. Carl has a lot of pride, which is why he was upset for so long. I reckon Sheila persuaded him to do the right thing because I was happy that my check went through quickly. After that, I could finally sleep. I sent emails to everyone in the company who had lost their jobs, offering to help them find new work. Some were upset and wanted nothing to do with me. I made sure to give them my email and phone number and wished them good luck. Others were thankful for my help. I reached out to every programmer, vendor, client, and friend to help them find a job. Sadly, it often wasn't enough. The job market in California was tough, so I decided to help a few people move. George wanted to go to Florida, where he could live off his Social Security. Gloria wanted to be near her mother. I only used my share of the money. Why did I help? I had hurt many people, and I wanted to fix some of it. I couldn't control what people like Andy and Allie had done to me, but I could control my own actions. Truthfully, I felt they were beneath me. They were suffering enough already, and I wanted to stay away from them. Then something unexpected happened. Allie called me. "Hey, Jimmy." "Jim." "Hi, Allie, how are you?" I asked. "I'm fine, thanks. I wanted to see if we could meet for a drink at Frank's, the bar we used to go to," she said. "Our lawyers won't like it if we talk," I reminded her, but she said, "This isn't about our divorce. It's about something else." She gave me the details, and since my schedule was free, I agreed. After we hung up, I put my phone away, and then Mindy and Swati came into the room. I knew they had overheard my conversation. "What do you think?" Swati asked Mindy. "You should go," Mindy said. "You need to hear her out. I'm not sure what it's about, but it might help." Swati agreed, but warned me to be careful. Allie can be tricky, she said. Good advice indeed. So I prepared myself for what lay ahead. I arrived at Frank's, and she was already in the back booth looking very nice. I sat down across from her and ordered a drink. It was her time to shine, so I wanted her to feel like the host. You look nice, she said. I've had a lot of free time, so I've been working out. You know how it is, wanting to look good for someone special. You had to move on, didn't you? It suits you, I replied. She wrinkled her nose. I live in an apartment now. I paused to let her talk. Yeah, well, things didn't go as I thought with Andy. I don't blame you. I blame how we started everything. Those paparazzi outside our door didn't help, but we put ourselves in that position. Kind of, I said calmly. I've heard things about how you help former staff and I want to join in. Help? I scratched my head. I wasn't sure she knew any of our 10 employees. Yes, I want to give some money and my time. We could set up a phone bank or make connections. I know many people and you might need some help. It was a clever idea. I can get People magazine to support us. Great optics, I sighed. She caught my change in mood. Of course it's the right thing to do, but it's smart for you too. It'll help many people and improve how others see you and those who worked with us and faced trouble. I could see her mind working. Ali, I said, trying to keep my voice soft. Her shoulders slumped. You don't want my help, do you? No, I can't accept. I'm here for the right reasons, not for how it looks, I shrugged. Sure, but one of the people I'll help find a job is myself, so don't think I'm a saint. How did you hear about this project? I asked. Your secretary is spilling secrets to the press. A reporter friend told me about it. Her eyes narrowed in suspicion. You're dating her, aren't you? I smiled slightly. Remember the Bob and Tom show when we were in Ohio? She seemed confused by my change of topic. Vaguely. They were funny in a strange way. I enjoyed bringing it up again. Bob used to say, "Show me a beautiful woman and I'll show you a man who's tired of trying to impress her." She frowned. What do you mean? If you had asked for a divorce before you started seeing Andy, if you had been honest, we wouldn't be having this conversation now. I would have given you a real divorce. Did you really think you were the only one feeling unhappy? But you never showed how you felt. Her pride was struggling to accept that I had reasons to feel upset. No, as you so pointedly said, you chose who to love, but remember you have to choose that every day. Even when your partner has flaws or can be difficult sometimes, you're being a hypocrite. You're treating that little secretary like a replacement. I shook my head. No, I'm not replacing her. Sure, I noticed her a few months ago, but I was just looking. I was thinking about how nice a new coat would be. I didn't expect you to take my coat, so I needed to get another one. So we're not having fun together. But that doesn't mean I can't see what might happen next. Is this the end for us? Yes, it's over, except for the paperwork. She looked a bit sad and a bit angry. She stood up and gave me the bill, but I didn't mind. The main thing was finished. When this all started, I talked to Swati about how to deal with the divorce. She said, Mr. Reynolds, these two are hiding their actions. You need to tell the truth so they can't do it again. I knew I couldn't let her look good. I also couldn't take her money. You see, my plan with the insurance people was to show them they could go after me all they wanted. My finances were empty. They'd have better luck getting water from a rock. A few small claimants had already given up, and the rest, facing bad publicity, stopped trying. Mindy asked the staff. I helped talk to the press. They wanted to sue the man spending his money to help them. As Ali said, it didn't look good. How did I lose $3.5 million so fast? Most of it went to things like helping people find new jobs or training. I was in debt to my former co-workers, but Swati wanted to become a citizen, and there was still the $1 million program for investors. A potential immigrant doesn't even need to spend the money. They just have to invest it. He and Prouty would soon be citizens, and they needed someone to help them invest. Do you know who that could be? Pradeep even forgave me for calling him a cheat. Carl, my best friend, got a big check for his help. And eventually, I'll return part of that wedding gift for my own wedding, or something like that. Or maybe I'd break his computer for $1 million. And let's just say Mindy is happy with what she makes as my assistant. In fact, I let her pay most of the bills now. She's not complaining even though we're taking our time. Like I said, I'm no saint, even if I pretend to be on TV. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.